This incident that I speak about was known as the Johnson County War in Wyoming in the years of 1893 and 1894, and I presume that some of the old-timers of today remember those days when those things happened. The way it first started, some of the cowboys working for the big outfits bought a few cattle of their own, and they branded them and turned them loose on the range. The cattle barons objected to this and passed a resolution, of course, that any cowboy owning a branding iron could not work for them. For the reason, them days there were a great many mavericks on the range, and the cattlemen divided them up among themselves. This caused considerable bitterness, as the cowboy claimed any animal without a brand belonged to the first one that found it. Now, there may have been some justification on both sides. At any rate, it developed into quite a feud. I heard one old cattleman remark that he knew cowboys that even their grandfathers never owned a cow, and had more cattle than he did. This feeling between stockmen and cowboys got to be very serious, as each side took the law into their own hands to a great extent, and there was quite a few people killed. The rustlers got so bold, they took a contract with one of the construction contractors to supply them with beef. They would go out on the range and butcher any animal they found, regardless of what brand was on the animal. The stockman appointed a stock detective, who was very capable and absolutely fearless, and for a while he held the rustlers somewhat in check. But as time went on, the sympathies of all the little ranchers and cowboys were with the cattle rustlers. I remember two boys that the cattlemen wanted put out of the way, but couldn't catch up with them. So they formed a posse and went out after them. They finally ran those boys into an old cabin out on the range and tried to get them to surrender without any success. They finally backed a wagon load of hay up against the cabin and set it on fire. When the cabin caught fire, the rustlers made a break to get away, and the posse killed both of them. There was another ex-cowboy I knew that decided to go into business for himself. He would go out on the range, shoot a steer, butcher it, bring it to town, and sell it. He went by the name of Spokane. He got along pretty well for a while, but one day the sheriff was trailing some horse thieves across the country and run onto Spokane with a steer shot down and was butchering it. The sheriff told him to throw up his hands, but instead, Spokane crouched down behind his steer and opened fire on the sheriff with his six-shooter and made it hard for the sheriff to get him. But the sheriff had a Winchester and could reach him at long range. He finally shot him in the arm, and Spokane came up and surrendered. The sheriff told me afterwards he sure hated to shoot him, as he was plenty game. I was in the hotel the night they brought Spokane in, and the doctor dressed his arm without any anesthetic. He lay on the couch and smoked cigarettes, just as unconcerned as if everything was all right and in no pain. They sent Spokane to the pen for 3 years, and when he got out, he straightened up and made a very good citizen. Con Price.
They say everything is bigger in Texas. Everything besides tough as nails, but short on stature, Richard Little Dick West. Little Dick wasn't like other men. He was wild and woolly. He shunned comforts and lived life the way he wanted. He had no empathy for any living thing, and most who knew him considered him a ruthless human being. As a toddler, he was found alone on the Texas prairie and raised by the man that found him. He grew up an outdoors man and would live under the stars year-round. Naturally, he became a cowboy, and it was on a cattle drive where he met and joined the Doolin gang. He rode with the gang a while then, after the disaster of the Coffeyville bank robbery. With all the Doolin gang being killed or captured, Little Dick went on the run alone. Living off the land and away from prying eyes, he evaded some of the Old West's most famous lawmen. While on the run, he met the Jennings brothers, Al and Frank, and their associates, the O'Malley brothers, Pat and Morris, and another man named Sam Baker. The two sets of brothers were also up to no good, and none of the men had any work or food. They were impressed with Little Dick's speed and accuracy with his 6 guns and his stories of robbery and murder. The 5 men needed food and decided the easiest way to get it would be to rob someone. They knew the Crossroads store would be an easy target. The men rode up outside, and just Al and Little Dick went in. As they stepped inside, the proprietor leveled his shotgun across the counter, no doubt like many times before. Instantly, Little Dick drew his revolver and fired at the owner, hitting him in the face. They looted the store and went on the run. The gang now tried their luck, robbing one of the roughest and deadliest saloons in Oklahoma Territory. The gang walked into the corner saloon with guns drawn. They proceeded to rob the saloon of its takings, and then they stole anything of value from the desperados who infested the place. A bold move, as these men were not to be played with. After this success, the gang went looking for a bigger payout. They decided to rob the Santa Fe train near Edmond. As the train was stopped at a tank taking on water, 2 of the gang boarded the engine, put a gun to the head of the driver, and told him to pull out. After moving a mile, the driver was ordered to stop the train, and the other 3 gang members boarded. While 3 of the robbers watched over the passengers, the other 2 smashed their way into the strong box in the express car. Unfortunately for them, the box only held a few $100s. They hid out for a week and then tried to rob another train by piling up timber track ties on the track. The driver saw the obstacle and had time to accelerate the train to full speed, and it burst through the barricade. The gang went back into hiding with their tails between their legs. It was at this time Sam Baker left the gang and went to live in town. He passed on information to the gang and asked questions about their activities, while he also double-crossed them by giving pursuing marshals the gang's plans. The gang set to rob another train at Purcell using the same method as before, and they waited at a water tank in the dark. A few horsemen were riding past the area. The gang thought they were lawmen and abandoned the ambush. When the train did arrive, it carried Bill Tilghman along with the driver, and the express car held a well-armed posse. The gang had dodged a bullet. Their next attempted robbery was in the little town of Minco, located near El Reno, Oklahoma. The gang made camp outside the town and sent in one of the O'Malley brothers to look the bank over. Pat rode down the only street in the tiny town as he passed the bank. He looked around, and he could see armed men sitting in the doorways of the buildings opposite. Pat rode on out of town and back to the gang. After a quick discussion, the gang abandoned the bank robbery and moved on. The gang then had a few successes and many failures, but perhaps the robbery that occurred on the 1st of October 1887 was their most memorable. A railroad gang was working on the track near Pocasset. When the gang rode up and drew their guns, they ordered a man to flag down and stop the train. The desperados covered the workers with their guns while they hid. The train came to a halt and the gang stepped out. They boarded the train and went through the car with the passengers and relieved them of all their valuables. When they broke into the express car, they found 2 safes. After minutes of trying to break them open, Little Dick went and retrieved sticks of dynamite from his saddlebags and placed them around the safes. Little Dick lit the fuse and jumped from the car and ran. The express car erupted in a fireball and blew the structure apart. The safes were found still intact. Once again, the gang rode off with their tails between their legs. Apart from the robbery being a spectacular failure, one of the O'Malleys was also recognized. Back at camp, Little Dick was blamed for the fiasco, and he left the gang to go solo once again. The rest of the gang hid out at the Spike S Ranch. A marshal named James Ledbetter and his officers staked out the ranch. One of the lawmen found one of the gang hiding in a wagon. He was caught and tied up in the barn. Al Jennings opened fire from the ranch house when he saw what was happening. The lawman returned fire, and over 100 shots were exchanged. The remaining outlaws escaped in the confusion. The last of the gang was captured after a tip-off. Ledbetter found the outlaws hiding under straw and blankets in the back of a wagon that Frank Jennings was driving across the line into Arkansas. On April 13, 1898, Little Dick West was laying low in the busy town of Guthrie when he was approached on the street by lawmen Heck Thomas and Bill Tilghman, who had tracked him there, when called to surrender. Little Dick refused and reached for his gun. Tillman and Thomas shot him down in a hail of bullets. Little Dick was buried in the Summit View Cemetery in Guthrie, and his tombstone can be found there today.